What's going on, guys? You're watching the Shield Bearer of Faith, and thank you so much for your patience the last couple weeks. My wife and I have been doing a fast. I'll talk more about that probably in the next video, though. And it's been really good. We've had a lot of really good questions answered so far. Huge blessings there. I'll talk more about that soon. But for today, I wanted to kind of springboard off of a comment that was made to a post that I made either yesterday or day before, I've forgotten which. And generally the post was telling you guys in a text format, very short version of like a Tales from the Street story, where I went, I don't know, probably a month ago, maybe something like that, to a situation dealing with a very complex series of issues. So we had a dog that had to be taken to a shelter. We had both parents of a child that were arrested, and we had a car that was involved. And then we had this child that was fully asleep that I ended up having to call social services for. They responded out, which doesn't always happen, actually. Just because you call social services doesn't mean they're coming. They are required to investigate to an extent reports, but that could be very minor, that could be very major, anything in between. So they don't always respond out for us either. In this case, they didn't have a choice. There was no guardian for this child. And the whole situation, like I said in that post, was just generally sad. This kid doesn't have any decisions in the situation they're in. They don't get to pick who their parents are. It's really sad. And now they're part of the system. And actually, I've been past the area where that whole thing took place recently, and the vehicle that was involved is still sitting there. So that means the parents are not out of jail. Sad, right? All decisions, though, that they have made. So I try to keep that in mind. And the comment was made by one of y'all, that I'm gonna paraphrase, that it takes something from you and that you have to deal with it a certain way. They are right. And so I wanted to take a minute and talk about my experiences to this point in life dealing with stress. Now, I'm not a psychologist. I am not a mental health professional. However, I have responded to a lot of mental health issues in the line of work. I have been to places where people are suffering from a great amount of PTSD. I have trained people that have PTSD. We had a guy have a severe reaction in one of my training classes before I went to Ukraine. And then I myself have had, to an extent, PTSD. Now, I use that term kind of conservatively because it gets thrown around a lot. In my job as an officer, people use the terminology that they have PTSD as if it's saying you have a stumped toe. It's just everybody. I don't do that. So I'm not someone who just goes around saying I have PTSD. No, I've had PTSD symptoms before. So what did those look like? Years ago, when I was doing police work the last go around, I had been to, in a fairly short amount of time, maybe over the course of a couple to a few years, I had been to a very large amount of violent, aggressive, unknown, bad calls. And eventually it will start to alter you a little bit. Now, how it alters you depends on a lot of factors. Where your spirit is, what you believe in. Do you have anyone to talk to? Do you drink a lot instead of just trying to use that built up anger or irritation for something beneficial like exercise? How you handle it's different, right? Well, I started having dreams that I wasn't even remembering. So I didn't consciously know I was having them, but my wife would wake me up because I was fighting in my sleep. I guess because I felt like I was fighting every day at work or going to aggressive things. People were just angry, hurting them, their family members, or not caring about their kids. Or I started going to a lot of calls dealing with children. Maybe they were just in terrible situations. Their living conditions were not okay. Their parents were addicts or kids that were dying or dead. And eventually it weighs on you. And eventually your body will start to respond differently. Now, what I found, though, was the issues that I was having was actually not directly from my job. It started from an incident before I was ever a police officer. Now, I only came to know this because I got told to go to something called PCIS, and that stands for Post Critical Incident Seminar. You hear my son singing in the background. We're doing some Twinkle Twinkle Star. So I got pretty much ordered to go to this Post Critical Incident Seminar by a lieutenant. Now, this lieutenant brought me into his office one day, years ago, and said, "Hey man, we got to talk." I said, "All right." So I sit down. He goes, "You doing okay?" I said, "Yeah, I'm fine." "Why?" He said, "I'm just wanting to check on you. You're acting different." I was like, "I'm good to go." He's like, "I don't think you are. I think you're struggling with some stuff, and I think you should go to this seminar." And I was like, "No, I don't need to go to that. I'm not broken, Lieutenant. I'm good to go." He said, "I didn't say you were broken, but I'm telling you, it's really good." And he told me, "I've been to it before. It's really good." Now, that's a very important piece. And if you've been on my channel any length of time, you probably heard pieces of this story, if not all of it, at some point. So when he told me that he had been there before and he was testifying about this seminar from a firsthand experience vantage point, that hits different, right? Than you trying to just tell me what's wrong with me, tell me to go fix it, but you don't have a clue what it's like to go to the thing you're telling me to use to fix it. So it came off very different. So I said, "All right, fine." And he also told me, he's like, "And I'd want you to choose to go, but I can order you to go, but I'd rather you choose it and your wife can go with you. It's 3 days. The police department will pay for it and everything." I was like, "All right, cool." So I went home, told my wife about it. I said, "Hey, would you go with me to this?" Of course, she said yes, because she's amazing. And we did. We went. In this very specific environment. It was all first responders, and they were all dealing with various levels of trauma. Now, some of them had been in active shooter situations. One guy had been at Virginia Tech when that active shooter situation happened, and he had this response that his wife, who was sitting next to him, had never understood. She had never heard him talk about what he dealt with that day at Virginia Tech. So the first time that she heard his testimony about what's been going on in his life was at this meeting, and that was a very long time after Virginia Tech happened. And he described that he was tasked with standing in a room, holding it down for evidentiary purposes, where there was these young adults, pretty much kids, right, that were dead. And all he remembered hearing was their phones vibrate. So he and his wife were at dinner one night. Her phone's on the table and it vibrates, and he takes the phone and throws it, according to their story. And his wife had no idea what was going on. She's like, "What is happening?" And he didn't tell her. He shut it down and kept it in. So when we're at this seminar and he's telling this story, he's saying, he's like, "I can't stand to hear a phone vibrate because I had to stand in that room for hours listening to these people try to get in touch with their dead children." And he's like, "And I can't stand it." There was all kinds of trauma. Most of it mental trauma, but some people had physical trauma as well, where they had been shot, assaulted, whatever the case was, in the line of duty usually. They got me to speak first at this seminar. We were in a big old circle with like 60 officers and their spouses for the most part, and I just happened to be the first one up. And so they hand me the mic, and they told you, focus on one specific incident if you can. Well, mine ended up being 4, technically, but in my brain they were joined. But the first one was the main one, and it dealt with my nephew. And if you've ever met me in person, you've probably heard me talk about my nephew. It's a testimony I have shared across the world. I shared it in Lebanon, I shared it in Ukraine, I've shared it all across the US. Every class I teach gets that testimony because it is foundational to my mindset, why I care about medical response. It shaped me differently. And it wasn't someone bleeding, which is, the stuff I teach now. It was somebody choking. So I share that testimony, and I share these other testimonies that were also about kids. at that moment, I was a dad by that time. About a day and a half later, you go in the next portions of the seminar have different interactions, different goals, but eventually you go to this one-on-one thing and you do something called EMDR. EMDR is trying to get your brain into the same type of mode as REM sleep. And you can go do your own research on EMDR. It kind of feels like, voodoo or something, because they'll start moving a green dot on a board, or they'll wave their fingers, or they'll tap your legs. And it's a specific scientifically proven thing to get your brain in a different place. And then they'll ask you a lot of questions. And among the questions they were hitting me with were about this incident, because they're trying to get your brain to do something different with that trauma. So we start talking about my nephew. And this guy starts pressing me with these questions. And eventually, and I don't even remember what questions he was asking, but it was all related to what do you see? What do you smell? What are you doing? Tell me about what's happening. Who's in the room? All this stuff, very detailed. And eventually, I start having a tear come down my face. My eyes start crying. And I said out loud, I was like, I'm going to fail them. And I didn't even know what I meant. And so he hit on that because I was having this emotional response that I hadn't had yet. And by the way, guys, when my nephew passed away, I never cried about it. I genuinely thought there was something wrong with me because I didn't cry. So when I'm in this moment with this guy and we're doing EMDR and I start crying, it was different. And I'd said out loud, I'm going to fail them. He goes, who? Who are you going to fail? And it struck me. I was like, I'm going to fail my own kids when they need me. I had never thought about that. Not consciously. I didn't go to work every day and deal with these issues with other people's children or go to these kids that were dying. I never consciously thought, I'm going to fail my kids when they need me. But it was definitely in there. That was the fear that I had. One day, when my kids need help, I'm not going to do it right, or I'm not going to be there, or I'm going to just make the wrong decision like I've done the last time that it mattered. Or like with these kids I've seen at work, where I just can't seem to help them with whatever help they need, right? And it just hit really different. So after that, once I realized what my actual root fear was, well, now we can try to deal with it. So I went and told my wife, I get out of this session. I told her about it. I was like, this is what happened. We left the seminar and it helped a lot. Now, it didn't fix the issues of the world, right? And I already had a good spiritual foundation by that point. I already had a good support structure from my wife or my extended family, my parents, things like that. I already had a good support structure, but it just put my head in a different space. I was like, nah, I can't have that in my head. You can't live your life through the fear of failure. It doesn't work. So instead, I put that aside. I gave that fear to the Lord and I said, you know what? I can't run my life through this filter. God, take this from me. I give it to you. And I trust that if my kids are ever needing me in that moment, you'll put me in the right spot. Or not, your will be done. I just gave it to him. And that's really what helped. But I had to figure out what was actually the problem, right? You can't fix what you don't know is broke. If you don't know how to diagnose a illness, you aren't going to appropriately fix it, most likely. If you don't know how to diagnose what issues are going on with a car, you're probably not going to be able to fix it. That's why I'm not a mechanic. So when they helped me diagnose what was going on really in my head, it helped a lot. Then we can go fix it. And that's also coming with other things that I was already doing. You have to burn the excess energy. There's some days you get home from whatever life's thrown at you, whether you're a cop or not, and you need to exercise. Your body needs to burn it. You need to burn that energy out. Got to put it somewhere, and if you're not careful, you'll put it into another human being, and that's not productive. You don't want to be a violent person. So find something more productive to put it into. Same thing with, what is your passions in life? Do you like helping other people? Because that brings me a lot of fulfillment. That brings me a lot of joy. When I go and teach classes to people and I witness about the Lord in those classes, or I'm praying with people as an officer, that's happened a lot recently. I've been praying about that. I've been asking God to send me to where I can pray with people, and he's been doing it. When you start doing those things that really matter, the things that bring you joy and fulfillment, it's a better outlet. It gives you positive energy in your life to try to counteract the negative energy that is going to come in life. And on top of that, having a really open conversation with your spouse, in my experience, helps. I have to be able to talk to them. And my wife is awesome about that. I can come home and tell her exactly what happened. She doesn't need it sugar-coated. She'll let me tell it the way it is. And that helps. I don't feel like I have to dance around it or keep it to myself. She wants to know. She wants to know what's going on with her husband. And that helps me get it out of my head, get it in the open. If we need to, we can pray about it as a team. And if we need to, we can deal with the consequences as a team. And then I guess the final thing that has helped me a lot is getting a different vantage point through exposure to other issues in life. So when I went to Ukraine, it changed my worldview on a lot of things, because I got out of my bubble and I saw someone else's bubble, a lot of someone else's bubbles, right? So when I got to observe what other people's issues can look like an active war in your home, where artillery shell can just come through your roof and you have nowhere else to go, you have no financial means, it really changed my perspective. Seeing what someone else goes through, it helped me be like, you know what? I just don't think I've got it that bad. So it just gave me a better perspective. And it made me want to serve more. It made me want to help other people. It didn't make me want to help Ukraine as a political thing, guys, any more than it makes me want to go help Joe Biden as a political thing. It didn't do that. It made me want to help human beings and try to be more compassionate and caring and use, I think, the spiritual giftings that I've been given. And by sharing my testimony about Christ and about the things that I've been through, whether it's with you guys or whether it's in class or whatever, by sharing those testimonies, that's how we use the bad things in life for something good. I use it to try to serve the Lord. Just yesterday, I got to share some of the stuff that I have experienced in my life with an 11-year-old who also has Tourette's and he has autism. I got to pray with his mom, who is into Norse paganism. I only felt confident about doing that because of what God's already brought me through. So use whatever you have been through for something good. If you have loss or trauma or injury, use that to witness about something much greater. Hope it helps. I hope you guys have a fantastic day and enjoy your week. I'll see you later.